Sponsors for this event: Shell Oil, the Department of State, Manchester Trade, and the U.S. Civil Society Coalition for African Trade and Investment. We thank them for all their help in making this event possible. And of course, I want to thank Steve McDonald, the consulting director for the Africa program here at the Center, for all the work he and his colleagues have done to bring us to this point. The Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars is the official and living memorial to our 28th president. The only president, I'll give you a 2-minute spiel, the only president we had who had a PhD. He always felt that you had to get scholars out of their ivory tower and understand the practical problems of governance. And you had to get policymakers away from their inbox where all they can think about is a meeting next Thursday. And Wilson felt that if you got them in the same room and had a dialogue between them, that better policy could emerge and better understanding could emerge. So we do two things here. We convene meetings, about 800 meetings a year, and we bring about 150 scholars from all over the world to Washington to research and write and rap with people working on the same issues in this town. We are very happy to have with us this morning Senator Ben Cardin. He has been working on Africa issues for some time. He's served in the House of Representatives on the Ways and Means Committee and was an early and very active supporter there of AGOA. The state of Maryland, with his support, is actively encouraging trade with Africa, and of course contains a large diaspora population of Africans with whom Ben Cardin works closely. Senator Cardin was elected as a United States Senator in 2006 after serving 19 years with distinction in the House of Representatives. And before that, I believe he also had roughly 19 years in the Maryland's House of Delegates. We're very happy to have him here this morning to lead off today's program, and without further ado, I want to welcome Ben Cardin to the Center.
Michael, thank you very much, and we certainly thank the Woodrow Wilson Center for its continued critically important role it plays in advancing public policy in this country and globally. We're very, very proud of the work that you do, and thank you for today's program. And Steve McDonald, I was just going to say a nice thing about you. You're not leaving me, are you? No, okay. Just let me also acknowledge Steve McDonald, the director of the African program. I think this is one of the most important parts of the work that the Woodrow Wilson Center does, and I thank you for your long-time commitment to this issue. And you're right, Mike, when you talk about that we have to get beyond looking at the next thing on our calendar, you're exactly right. The next thing on my calendar is some partisan fight on Capitol Hill, so maybe I'll just spend the rest of the day here and be able to deal with something that perhaps will make more of a difference. We really do need to reflect more, and today I want to just start off by a little bit of a celebration. AGOA has been a great success. I'm proud to have been in the Congress on the Ways and Means Committee when AGOA was passed. It's time to celebrate, and I think we can do that. And you can point to many different success stories. You can look at specific businesses and specific countries. I like to take a look at my state of the fact that we set up a Prince George's County, Maryland African Trade Office. Now, we couldn't have done that without the preference laws. Couldn't have done it. AGOA made that possible because we had a tool that was absolutely critical if we were going to be able to set up the type of connections we wanted to between companies located in Maryland and opportunities on the continent of Africa. And that trade office has been a great success. We have encouraged economic development opportunities from investors here in the United States and Africa. It's been a two-way program. Many countries are participating. And it's an example of strengthening the ties between communities in Maryland and Africa. It's a small business initiative, and that's a very appropriate subject today because on the floor of the United States Senate, we have a small business bill that looks like will not get the 60 votes needed to proceed. We'll find out at about 10:30 this morning. But it helps small business growth both in Africa and in the United States, because we do believe that will be where the growth will take place in jobs, innovation, and we think reliable partnerships, confidence that's being developed. So we're celebrating in our state the second anniversary of the Trade Office, and I'm pleased that the appropriators looks like are going to provide a little bit more money this year to advance that particular issue. And I'm sure you can talk about a lot of the other different success stories in specific countries in Africa where there's been growth. I want to sort of tie this together and bring in another hat that I wear. I do serve on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I do serve on the African Subcommittee, so this is certainly a direct interest to me to develop economic opportunities in Africa, to help the economic well-being of the people who live in sub-Saharan Africa. That's of direct interest to me. Creating more markets for American products is of a direct interest to me. I want the wealth of Africa to increase so that we can sell more products made in Maryland and Africa. I mean, all that is critically important. But I really want to tie this together and tie it together in another hat that I wear in another celebration that we're taking place this year, and that is the 35th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Accords. I chair the U.S. Helsinki Commission. And the U.S. Helsinki Commission consists of countries, 56 countries in Europe, Central Asia, the United States, and Canada. But it's, I think, the premier international organization that recognizes the tie between economic empowerment, human rights, and security. That came home to me recently, this past week, in a hearing we had on Afghanistan as to whether our policies in Afghanistan are succeeding or not. And the witnesses there pointed out that we'll never succeed with security in Afghanistan if we don't succeed with empowering people with their human rights and the economics of the region. It goes hand in glove. You need to do that. So many people look at AGOA as an empowerment for the people of Africa to strengthen their economy, to do what is right from the point of view of just our international responsibilities to a continent that has been so much underutilized internationally and in some respects has been abused internationally. I look at it for all those reasons, but also as a security issue. That by empowering the people of Africa, we're going to have more stable governments. More stable governments mean that our foreign policy will be safer, and America will be safer, and the security globally will be safer by bringing this all in together. So it's not just creating more jobs in Maryland because we create stronger markets in Africa. It's about having a safer globe and having a stronger international presence. All that, to me, is why we can celebrate AGOA. But if we're going to be frank about this, I think we have to not only look at our successes, we have to be candid about the fact that we have significant challenges that have not been met. And we need to realize how important the civil society's participation and oversight is to accomplishing those goals. So, yes, we'll celebrate. And I'll tell you something else that we can celebrate. In the passage of the financial regulation bill that President Obama signed just a few days ago, there's an amendment that was put into that bill that I sponsored with Senator Lugar. We didn't have much of a chance to get that included when we started the effort. But thanks to the help of many civil societies and many lobbyists for public interest, we were able to get that amendment included in the conference report. And it's now the law of the land. And it will have a dramatic impact on the work that you're doing in Africa. It will strengthen AGOA. And what that amendment did is require extractive industries to disclose their financial transactions. We are talking about mineral wealthy countries, many of which are African countries, in which the people are the poorest in the world. The mineral wealth has become a mineral curse because it's been used by the powerful in that country as a source of funds for corruption, not to improve the economics of the people of their nation. And that's been furthered by the ability of the mineral companies to make payments to the leaders of those African countries and Asian countries without disclosing the fact that they're making those payments. And the amendment that I offered with Senator Lugar will require the mineral companies in their filings with the SEC to publicly disclose the amount of money and types of contracts they have for mineral rights around the world. The people will now be able to follow the money. It's the first step towards reform so that we can, again, strengthen the economics and good governance of the countries of sub-Saharan Africa. So I think we do have some things to be pleased about. I think we are making progress. AGOA has been a great success. It's the most comprehensive expansion of GSP, covering an additional 1,800 additional tariff lines, including 41 countries. Well, that's something to be very proud of. It's created 300,000 jobs in the apparel, textile, jewelry, handicraft, and many other areas, electronics. It's been extremely important in helping women. Now, this is an issue that our committee, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and Secretary of State Clinton is spending a lot of effort on gender equity issues. AGOA is critically important in helping women in sub-Saharan Africa. When we look at the numbers, we find that it has been indeed successful in that regard. So, what are the challenges we have ahead of us? Well, if we look at any objective standard, we have reason to be concerned as to the slow pace of progress. Poverty in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, 70% of the population live on less than $2 a day. That's unacceptable. 81% of the imports that come into the United States from AGOA come from 3 countries: Nigeria, Angola, and South Africa. We can certainly do better as far as reaching out to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The scope of AGOA is very limited when it comes to agriculture, and yet agriculture is the critical economic way of life for the people of Africa. So we need to do a better job in how AGOA deals with the primary source of resources. And when we look again at gender equity issues, women produce 80% of the agricultural products in Africa and own 2% of the land. That's outrageous. We can do much better than that, which brings me to the importance of civil society. It's not enough to just make tools available. It's not enough to provide investment and resources. We have to be able to be willing to do more. Technical assistance, developing accountability standards, helping with the construction of infrastructure, dealing with good governance issues, dealing with those issues in which civil society can play the most important role, the most effective role. And that's why I was so pleased that the Woodrow Wilson Center is holding this discussion today. This is not a one-time only, it's been a continuing interest. But we have to build greater capacity, not just by the opportunity that AGOA presents, but by providing the on-ground help and the accountability standards. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee held a very interesting hearing not too many months ago where Bill Gates and Bill Clinton testified before us, both of which have produced incredible private sector help around the world, providing direct assistance in Africa. And we asked them that question. We said, you know, what can we do? I mean, how do you deal with corruption? And Bill Gates made a very interesting reply. He says, we won't work in that country. We just leave. There's got to be tough love here on good governance. There's got to be tough love on gender equity issues. There's got to be tough love on the expectations, the reasonable expectations of what we need to be able to accomplish for the benefit of the people of Africa, which, as I said earlier, directly relates to our security and our economy. We have to connect the dots. So I guess my challenge to you in these discussions is, what should our goal be for AGOA in the next 10 years? Where do we expect to be 10 years from now? What do we need to do? Does Congress need to change the law to provide greater tools? Does Congress need to give you greater authority in regards to accountability? Do we need to engage more international organizations to deal with credit issues or to deal with capacity building that perhaps we can't do? Or are there other organizations that are in better position to do that? What will our strategy be to bring all those tools together so that we accomplish our goal that we set out for the next 10 years? I really do believe that Congress wants to be your partner in this. We spend a lot of time and effort as to how we can be greater partners with Africa. And I think that your work here can help us develop the right tools. We don't want to walk away, using Bill Gates' term. We don't want to walk away from any country that's in need. But we don't want to be wasting opportunities. AGOA is an opportunity. We don't want to waste that opportunity. We want to make sure that it's effectively used to create the long-term impact that all of us want to see come out of the U.S. engagement. I am confident about it. I'm optimistic about the future. I think the potential for growth in Africa is incredibly strong. I think the impact it can have on the United States is extremely positive. So it goes beyond just the small business owners who are benefiting today in Prince George's County, Maryland. I think it goes to the strength of this nation as to what we can do to make the world a little bit safer, provide economic opportunity for people who are in incredible need, and, by the way, strengthen all of our lives. That's our challenge, and thank you all for being willing to participate in this discussion.
Thank you very much, Senator Cardin. We really appreciate it. We know you have a very busy schedule and have to get back to the Hill.
I looked at my card. The next thing on the
Okay, so we're letting you leave gracefully. You can go out the back there and negotiate your way. We'll call up our next panel. Greg is going to be beginning the day for us, the work day. I was very pleased to have Senator Cardin here, and later this afternoon, I hope you all stay for the reception where we'll have Congressman Royce. One of the great things about AGOA, I think, is the fact that it was a wonderful example of bipartisanship on the Hill when it came into existence. We had very hard work on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, to bring that into existence. We've had two presidents in a row, now our third, of different parties who have been implementing AGOA, and I think it's a remarkable example of the positive role the Hill can play. So it was a pleasure having him here. Greg, it's yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gregory Simpkins. I'm the coordinator of the U.S. Civil Society Coalition for African Trade and Investment. This is a coalition of about 5 coalitions, actually, who joined together. Over the years, since 2001, elements of our coalition have managed the various AGOA civil society forums. The first one was about a half a day, and since then we've had full day, in fact, multi-day programs here and in Africa. And so we welcome you to this one. We think you'll find it very interesting. I hope you have taken a look at the agenda, which should be outside. We also have a flyer which gives you some background on the organizations that comprise the Civil Society Coalition. We're going to start in just a minute. We're going to be linked with the U.S. Embassy in Lilongwe, Malawi, and also Abuja, Nigeria, to speak with NGOs and business people in those cities so they can join you in taking a look at what civil society has done over the last 10 years. We think there's been quite a bit of progress. As the Senator said, civil society has a significant role to play, we feel. I'll talk about that a little later when we get to the panel. But suffice it to say that, that there has been this kind of cooperation over the years. And in fact, some of our partners who've been with us for a long time are here today. I'm going to surprise her and mention Bernadette Palo of the African Society. She was one of the first people who worked very hard on not only getting AGOA passed, but having it implemented well. And I think civil society has been able to engage both the House and the Senate and the administration in doing so. In fact, Senator Cardin was one of our strongest allies when we helped to convince the Senate back in, I think it was 2005, to pass the AGOA Acceleration Act. We explained to them that AGOA is not just a business-to-business process, it's also a development process, because as people start businesses, they hire people, they create wealth, the government gets tax money, they can build roads, they can do all the things that are necessary for a just society. I'd like to introduce some of the leaders or representatives of the coalitions who are here. David Saunders of the African American Unity Caucus, which is a project of the CFA. Please, if you would, let everybody take a look at you. We have Dr. Patrick Wilson, who was with the Blacks in Government Africa Partnership. I think Fred Oladende of the AGOA Civil Society Network was just here. He went out for a second. He's actually the moderator of this. Oh, Fred, there you are, hiding in the back. Fred and I worked together on the first of our AGOA Civil Society forums, both here and in Mauritius and in Washington again. And his organization brings to our coalition civil society organizations from across Africa. And we have a colleague who is no longer with us today, Ray Almeida, who many of you may have remembered from Bread for the World. Ray was the voice among us who always said that we need to have the African voice, because AGOA, good though it is, was not a negotiated document between African countries and America. So we have to make sure that it reflects what the needs and interests of Africans are. You know, if you give somebody a present and they don't need it or don't want it, it isn't much of a present. So this is something, this preference program is something that we provided to Africa, but we need to make sure that it fits their needs as they evolve. And I think by including the African voice in this, especially through the AGOA Civil Society Network, but also through the other organizations that we have working on this, I think we've been able to do this. So if you bear with us for a moment, we're going to get our panel up here, and we're also going to see about connecting with the embassies. They were originally told that we were going to do a little later than 9:30, that we're going to start at 9:45, but we changed the program a little bit so we can get to them a little earlier. Unfortunately, as I communicated with them early this morning, some of the people who are going to be in the room may not have gotten that message. So we will get everybody in place and we'll start. I think you'll find it to be a very fascinating discussion. And what we want to come out of this with are recommendations for action. The Civil Society Coalition here in America is dedicated to work on not just AGOA, but U.S.-Africa trade and investment generally between the AGOA forums. We're not just here to organize these things every year. We really want to work on it. We worked on preference programs, the change in preference programs. We have supported the administration on its food security policy initiative, and we're working in a number of areas to make sure that U.S.-Africa trade and investment is as effective as it can be. So we'll start our program in just a moment. Let me get the Tijan and find out. Start. I don't really want to start us talking until they get on. So we might just take a break.
Okay. You starting fast. You start should have started program.
Now, we're just going to give it about 10 minutes because we don't have enough time to talk. We've sent your paper. You've sent my paper. So they've looked at it so they can respond to it. What we might have to do is take a little break here because they are under the impression it's 9:45. I told them it's 9:30, but there was some miscommunication with the state. So we can't really start without them. So that's true. Let me talk to Tijan.
Dan Davis is
Dan Daly.
Daly.
Yeah. Let me find out from Tijan who the other person in the Abuja is. Because I saw the emails this morning. He didn't really say. The guy didn't really say.
Yeah. But I know it should be the security at the embassies to at least access the embassy.
Right. Let me go get from her. See if I can get the name of the guy.
Okay.
We can just use this time.
Then I use this. This one is.
Okay. I think we can use this time more. Maybe we can use this time just to talk about other things.
Yeah, if they can be given some time, at least they give, of course, the impressions they will highlight would form our discussion, would form our direction as far as
He wants
what Greg has.
to be on the DVC before we start. Oh, thank you.
No, that's you.
Maybe I should let the two guys. Maybe I should just sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
If you try not of the presence of, quite a number, if it were not of the presence of quite a number of people from the African embassies, the number could be very, very small.
Yes. More people are coming.
Really, still.
More people are coming. In Washington, it's 9:30. It's too early.
Yeah. So, this gentleman didn't speak.
He said, let me share my paper with you.
Him and who are here? Got McDonald.
McDonald was sitting there. Van Dusen was sitting here. And the speaker was Cardin, Ambassador Cardin, Senator Cardin.
Okay. Oh, the one who spoke last?
No, the one that spoke last was, the one who spoke last, This is going to be my presentation. Okay. Are we ready? I have just few things. I need to know how to use the PowerPoint. It's not.
Taking your seat. It's mine.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, and welcome to the 8th U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Trade and Economic Cooperation Civil Society Session. My name is Fred Oladende, and I am the president of the Foundation for Democracy in Africa and the chair of the AGOA Civil Society Network. The AGOA Civil Society Network was established on January 17, 2003, during the second U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Trade and Economic Cooperation Forum, the first CSO session, which took place in Phoenix, Mauritius. The mission of the network is to empower African people through their civil society organization to work with governments and businesses to take maximum advantage of the benefit of AGOA on behalf of the citizens of their countries, and to ensure civil society participation in subsequent forums in the U.S. and Africa. For the record, this civil society session of the U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Trade and Economic Cooperation is the 8th. The first was held in Phoenix, Mauritius, January of 2003. The second was held here in Washington, D.C. in December of 2003. The third was held in Dakar, Senegal in July of 2005. The fourth was held here in Washington, D.C. in June of 2006. The fifth in Accra, Ghana in July of 2007. The sixth here in Washington in July of 2008. The seventh was held in Nairobi, Kenya in July 4th, 2009, and the 8th today, July 29th to the 30th of 2010. On behalf of the U.S. Civil Society Coalition for Trade and Investment, members which include the African American Unity Caucus, AAUC, the AGOA Civil Society Network, Blacks in Government, African Partnership Secretariat, the Partnership to Cut Hunger and Poverty in Africa, the Trade, Aid, and Security Coalition task, I welcome you to this particular forum. This year's theme, a decade of progress in bridging the U.S.-Africa trade gap, and the title of this panel, Civil Society and AGOA 2000 to 2010, gives my two distinguished presenters here in Washington and speakers joining us from Lilongwe, Malawi, and Abuja, Nigeria, by direct video conference, the opportunity to share the challenges, opportunities, regrets, and failures of our efforts over the last decade to work with our government and businesses to take maximum advantage of the benefits of AGOA on behalf of the citizens of the presently 40 eligible AGOA countries. According to data from the U.S. International Trade Administration, U.S. total trade with sub-Saharan Africa, export plus import, decreased by 40.7% in 2009, resulting from the current global economic and financial crisis. U.S. exports also decreased by 18.1% to $15.1 billion. AGOA imports were $33.7 billion in 2009, which is 49% less than in 2008, mainly due to a 50% decline in AGOA petroleum product imports. AGOA imports were $3.4 billion. With these fuel products excluded, AGOA imports were $3.4 billion, decreasing by 33.4%. AGOA minerals and metals fell by 67%. energy-related products by 50%, chemical and related products by 38%, transportation equipment by 25%, and textiles and apparel imports by 19%. Only AGOA agricultural products grew by 16%. Today, the top 5 AGOA beneficiary countries include Nigeria, Angola, South Africa, Chad, and the Republic of Congo. Other leading beneficiaries include Gabon, Lesotho, Democratic Republic of Congo, Madagascar, and Kenya. Colleagues and friends, we must rise up to the occasion and come up with creative recommendations and intervention during this U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Trade and Economic Cooperation Forum on how to realign U.S.-Africa trade policy to the realities of present prevailing conditions in Africa and work for the expansion of U.S.-Africa trade and investment ties. We must coordinate our efforts on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean through networks such as the AGOA Civil Society Network, the U.S. Civil Society Coalition for Trade and Investment, and others, to promote access to regional and international markets for Africa's commodities and products, particularly in sectors that will empower and bring freedom, democracy, civil rights, human rights to the over 70% of the population living below the poverty line on less than $2 a day in rural communities in Africa. Before I introduce my 2 presenters, I want to make sure that we are now on with Lilongwe and Nigeria. Are we?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So, I would kind of take a brief pause and try to see how soon are we going to be linked. Oh, now we are.
Oh, there we are.
It's not right there. Just to share with you, from at the opening of the first U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Trade and Economic Cooperation here in Washington on October 29, 2001, President George W. Bush said the following, and I think it is still true, and that is why we are all here today. He said, "No nation in our time has entered the fast track of development without first opening up its economy to world markets. The African Growth and Opportunity Act is a roadmap for how the United States and Africa can tap the power of markets to improve the lives of our citizens." And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what we in civil society have done over the last decade. And my 2 presenters will both share with us the experience from the U.S. civil society point of view and also from the African civil society point of view. Let me first introduce my 2 presenters. Both are well known in Washington and capitals across Africa as experts on AGOA and U.S.-Africa trade. Gregory Simkin is a native Washingtonian, a founding member of the AGOA Civil Society Organization Network in Phoenix, Mauritius in 2003. During that period, Gregory Simkin was my vice president at the Foundation for Democracy in Africa. Greg is a specialist in international policy management, who currently is vice president for policy and program development for the Leon H. Sullivan Foundation and the Policy Committee Chair for the African American Unity Caucus. He previously served as professional staff member for the U.S. House Subcommittee on Africa from 1997 to 1998, where he advised the chairman on African policy issues, managed subcommittee hearings, and conducted oversight on U.S. programs, and in the same capacity for the U.S. House International Relations from 2005 to 2006. He has testified before the Senate Finance Committee on Trade Preference Reform and before the House Subcommittee on Africa on Human Rights in Africa. Currently, Greg writes a blog on current African issues called Africa is Rising 2010. The blog web is www.africarising2010.blogspot.com. My second presenter today is Ayoma Matunga of Social Development Network, SODINET. I worked very closely during the preparation for the 8th U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Economic and Trade Forum last year in Nairobi with Ayoma. Ayoma studied Master in Economics at the University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. He holds a diploma in marketing. Matunga trained in NGO financial management, international budget project, and currently works with SODINET as program coordinator, where he coordinates Social Watch East African region, and also economic governance and Futa Magendo, a project working on eradicating corruption in Kenya. Previously, he worked as a researcher with Future Group and International Population Center. He served in various committees such as Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission Strategic Committee, NGOs Policy Review Steering Committee, coordinated logistics during the World Social Forum held in Nairobi, Kenya in 2007, and was the chairman of the AGOA NGO Working Group in preparation for the 2009 forum in Nairobi, Kenya. The title of his paper is Policy Gaps That Affect Civil Society Organizations' Effective Involvement in East Africa Community Regional Integration and Trade Expansion. And Greg Simpkins' paper today will be on American civil society role in the passage and implementation of AGOA.
Okay.
And so I would ask Greg Simpkins to give us his presentation. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Before I start, I should tell you that having done these a few times at previous AGOA forums and also a couple of years ago with the Prince George's County Africa Trade Office. In fact, Pat Parker of the Africa Trade Office is with us today. Sometimes, thank you, Pat. Sometimes people have some traffic issues getting in, and it's rush hour where they are. It's rush hour here too, but it's the other rush hour for them. So I think some people have been a little delayed. That's why we decided to go forward. At any rate, when AGOA was being debated back in the mid-'90s, there was great division among civil society. There were some of us who thought that big business, as they saw it, trade as big business, is not to be trusted. They were looking at Enron and so many other companies, WorldCom, thinking, well, we can't trust these. We don't really need to be a part of this. Others of us thought that the AGOA process offered a way for African businesses to create jobs and therefore wealth, that would be beneficial to the people and to the governments. And so we forged ahead with trying to support the AGOA legislation. I think that there were some miscalculations along the way, though. one of the focuses of the original AGOA bill was to help Africa reindustrialize, because most of these countries had some industry in them when the colonial powers were in charge. When they left, they closed everything down. If you go through many African countries, you see a lot of closed factories. Those factories were producing cereals and other value-added products when the colonial powers were there. When they left, they took everything with them, in some cases, even the light bulbs. So when the AGOA bill was put together, the idea was that if we encourage industrialization, particularly starting in textiles, that this would be of benefit to Africa to create jobs. Historically, that's how industrialization has happened. If you look at the Industrial Revolution, it started in this country, first in England and in other countries, in making clothing and making shoes, hats, and from there you become increasingly more sophisticated. However, we didn't fully take into account the impact of an international agreement called the Multi-Fiber Agreement. That was the agreement that limited the amount of textiles you could export into any other country. That agreement kept China from using its massive production to just overwhelm other countries. In January of 2005, it expired. When that happened, the Chinese production of textiles and apparel and the export to other countries, including this one, which is the largest market, consumer market in the world, overwhelmed the African production. Because unlike China, where you have this mass economy of scale, in African countries you have, for one thing, you have quite a few African countries. They're not all producing in concert with each other or shipping in concert with each other. So while Africa is certainly, as a whole, rivals China and India in terms of population, they don't in terms of production, because what Benin produces really has no relation with what its next door neighbor Nigeria produces. If they would join forces, it would be a different story. That hasn't happened yet. It's hopefully in the process, but it hasn't happened yet. So what happened was that, as I say, the Chinese overwhelmed them, but also you had other Asians. You had Bangladesh. You had India, of course. And because of that, the African textile producers couldn't keep up. Another thing happened, and I have to say that this is something that we did tell the African governments. I don't know that they passed this on to their businesses, because we advised them that because of the textile breaks and the tariff breaks, the tariff breaks and the quota breaks under AGOA, essentially what AGOA is a process in which there's no quotas, no tariffs. In line items like textiles and apparel, that can be as much as 17%, which is, in a small margin business like textiles and apparel, that's huge. However, what happened was a lot of these Asian businesses, particularly Chinese, came in. They took over the textile businesses in the African countries, and using their registration as an African company, they took advantage of those benefits. So if you look in northern Nigeria now, whereas you had many huge and very successful textile manufacturers, they were no longer in business. They weren't investors. The management was no longer African. It was Asian. And so the Asian producers benefit, but the country itself doesn't benefit as much as we would have liked to have done. Another thing happened was that some countries that were fairly successful, like Zimbabwe, were excluded from AGOA because they didn't meet the requirements of AGOA. There were problems with governance, problems with human rights. So I was at a factory in Harare some years ago, and I think it was Xavier Company. They used to have production large enough to satisfy at certain points JCPenney. But when AGOA started and when Zimbabwe was excluded, they lost their contracts because they no longer had that 17% differential. Now, the other thing that we did, the other miscalculation, and this wasn't completely the fault of civil society, is we, government, business, didn't take into consideration agriculture. You heard Senator Cardin say earlier that agriculture is the backbone of Africa's economies, and it is. 70% of Africans are in agriculture. And by rights, that should be the leading trade linkage between America and Africa. However, all of the language on agriculture was left out of the first bill because there was a fear that the committees on agriculture in the House and the Senate would sit on the bill rather. We hadn't had a major trade bill since NAFTA before AGOA. So what happened was it was taken out. We all said, well, we'll put it back in the next one. But over the years, we kept putting refinements to the textile language, but we didn't really do much on agriculture. On the bill I told you about, the AGOA Acceleration Act, there was language that was put in. The Partnership to Cut Hunger and Poverty in Africa and Bread for the World specifically put in language, but it was taken out because that would have thrown the jurisdiction from just the Ways and Means Committee, which introduced the bill, to another committee. The chairman didn't want to do that, so he just took it out. Now, American civil society organizations have worked to build support for putting that language back in. It's been in subsequent bills, but those bills haven't succeeded in being passed quite yet. We're still working on it. Now, that brings me to capacity building. Part of the language that we had was capacity building for African farmers and producers. We, as a government, have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in capacity building under AGOA. However, that training has gone to governments and not to producers. In America, we have our government, our USDA, we have extension agents that we call them. They go out and train the farmers and other producers on what fertilizers to use, on what produce is most popular, what the prices are, where the markets are. In Africa, that's not the case. You have two things happening. One is the government people who come back from these training sessions take the materials, they put them on the shelf. They don't go share them with anybody. The other thing is you have a lot of cabinet shuffles in Africa. The Minister of Agriculture today, 3 months from now, can be the Minister of Mining. 3 months later, he's the Minister of Tourism. So the training you did for that person back in April is no good by October or even earlier. So we're not passing on this information. I'll give you a good example. We sell DDT, or allow DDT to be sold in Africa, the pesticide, which actually is very effective, but we have banned it here. You cannot import anything into the United States that's been treated with DDT. Well, unfortunately, nobody told the African farmers that. So they use the most effective pesticide they can find, and in African ports, it isn't inspected because they don't have a problem with it. When you get to the American port, it can be detained, and as Dr. Wilson will talk about in his presentation later today, once you're detained, you're on the bad list for a long time. And that means that all of that produce that you shipped in that container and you're expecting a nice return, it's detained at the port, it's held, and you know, fresh produce can't last for so long. It's not like you could send it back home and use it there. You've lost a lot of money. So we need to do a better job of that, and civil society is working on getting that language into the legislation. Now, in a lot of international donor programs, particularly the Millennium Challenge account, they talk about a three-legged stool. That is government, business, and civil society. And that's how this is supposed to work. That government, business, and civil society are supposed to cooperate and facilitate the wheels of trade. Last year, in presenting our findings from our civil society forum to the ministerial and the business leaders who were there, I likened it to a football game. And you can imagine either African football or American football, but football. The governments are the referees, but in this case, they also make the rules. The players, obviously, are the business people, both African and American. The sportscasters, if you will, are civil society. We're the ones who tell you what happened, why it happened, what should happen. If we work together, we can make this more effective. If we don't work together, there are kinks in the system that will not get worked out because each side has its benefits, but it has its limitations. So we have to work with each other to make it happen. We're the conveners of conferences like this. We are the think tanks. We are the faith-based organizations that give small business their first start. We play a major role. We're also the unions who work with business in terms of labor rights. So I think we have a great value in terms of what we bring to this process. That's why we decided last year to create the U.S. Civil Society Coalition for African Trade and Investment, because every year the State Department, we certainly appreciate their help, would gather us together and ask us which of you is going to sponsor the Civil Society Forum this year. Well, it got to be a little tedious after a while. We're all working on trade and investment, but we weren't necessarily working together. And as Fred has described the members of this group, we span current and former government employees, we have businesses, we have trade experts, we have advocates, we have faith-based organizations, we have so many groups that run the gamut of society. And I think working together, we can be more effective going forward. That's why we want to come out of this with recommendations from you and from our colleagues in Africa on what should we be working on, what is the most important items that we should focus on, because we can't do everything. What's the most important thing to do? So with that, I think I'll turn it over to my colleague so that he can give an African perspective on civil society and its role in AGOA.
Thank you very much, Greg. Before you take the floor, can we check and make sure if we are connected now to Lilongwe and Abuja? I can see we have quite a number of participants already in. Lilongwe, are you with us?
This is Lilongwe here. Yes, we've got you. The video is a bit choppy. I think we have some bandwidth issues, but the audio is very clear, so we're very happy to join this forum.
Thank you very much, Dave. And Abuja, are you also online? Can you hear us?
Yes, we're here and we have a clear picture. We still have some participants coming in, and they'll quietly come in as we continue the conference.
Thank you very much. And can you please introduce yourselves? Lilongwe, can you introduce yourself to participants here in Washington, D.C.?
All right, I'll start. My name is Daniel Daly. I'm the Economic and Commercial Officer with the U.S. Embassy here. I'm joined by representatives of government, civil society, and business. I'll ask them to introduce themselves. If you just speak up, the intake will pick you up. So.
My name is Bruce Mutali. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Tobacco Control Commission. How are you?
My name is Graham Tuniba, Head of Markets and Business Development from Tobacco Association of Malawi.
My name is Emmanuel Karuma. I work with Malawi Revenue Authority.
My name is Russell Temple, Malawi.
I'm Konex Masankibre from Civil Society Agriculture Network. I am Dragon Chikonga with the National Smallholder Farmers Association of Malawi, NASCOM.
I am Noah Sangore from African Institute for Corporate Citizenship.
I am Joran Banda, Minister of Government Planning and Cooperation.
I am Charles Kazembe from Malawi Entrepreneurs Development Institute, Munich.
I am Jacinta Chibero from One Village, One Product program in Malawi.
Thank you very much, Lilongwe. The audio wasn't as clear as we would like it, but when we come to interventions and questions and answers, please, again, we would ask that you introduce yourself before you make your interventions. Can we now go to Abuja? Abuja, can you please introduce the participants there?
Yes, my name is Meredith McKee. I'm in the Public Affairs section here at U.S. Embassy, Nigeria. And we also have members from the government and from civil society and business here, and we will go around the table and I will let each individual introduce themselves. Would you like to start?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Roland Oro. I work with the USAID here in Nigeria. Thank you.
Good day. My name is Badeji Abikoye. I was Director of Trade up to January this year and retired. I'm now in the public and I run the business Bademo Nigerian Limited.
I'm Linda Middleton. I'm the CEO of African Theatre Project and also CEO of Magnus Opus Nigerian Limited. I promote trade and investment between countries in Africa and also in the continent of Asia.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Shehum Hadi. I'm the Secretary General of Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative, RAPA, which is a women's rights-based non-profit organization. And we're interested in this initiative because of the way it impacts on women and children.
Good afternoon. My name is Haja Rekha Isa. I work with FOMWAM, Federation of Muslim Women's Society of Nigeria, Abuja.
Good afternoon. I'm Mariam Larry Adamu, the FCT Form 1 Adera, Head of Department Special Services, FCT Muslim Pilgrims from February. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
And that's everyone at our table for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have a cross-section of CSO representatives in Abuja and also in Lungwe. And we have a large cross-section also here with us in Washington. Gregory Simpkins from the Leon Sullivan Foundation has just given us his presentation, and I believe his paper was earlier circulated, so I think in Abuja and also in Lilongwe that you have copies of his presentation. Each of our presenters would have 10 minutes to make their presentation, and after that we will come back to Abuja for your intervention. And then we would go to Lilongwe to see if you have any intervention, recommendation, observations. And after that, we would open the floor for questions and answers. I would now call on Ayoma Matunga, who will present his paper now. So Ayoma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fred. In any institutional organ, there must be policies that are meant to benefit the citizenry, especially the constituency which the institution is targeting to reach for economic, social, and even political benefits. In reflecting this kind of institutions, I thought it advisable to focus on the East African community, which to a larger extent is underlying its underlying policies and realities of the community are meant to bring together the stakeholders or economic development with a view to improve the regional economy. Apparently, the community, in this case, from the treaty itself, which formed the East African community, there are quite a number of gaps, policy gaps, which have not been really bringing together the key stakeholders. More so, the civil society has not been really given enough space to participate effectively in the community or development agenda, community, international, trade, component of it, as well as empowering people towards the ideals or the main objectives of the East African community. Apparently, as you may believe it or you might have seen, it is the same arrangement almost in every configuration that we may be having in Africa. From COMESA to East African Community, SADC, and any other which we may think of, as we have also different configurations for different international trade negotiations like the economic partnership agreements. Normally the statutes which are in place are really not meant to favor the civil society. And if we look at the East African Community Treaty, quite a number of articles within the treaty actually are spelling in a way which I would say a light touch on the need for civil society's involvement. These articles actually are not really enforced at certain level, right from the partner states level to the community secretariats level, giving a kind of a vacuum in terms of relationship between the civil society and the community secretariat, as well as the national government in form of either the relevant ministries, I would say, like in this case, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Agriculture, or their recognition of the civil society actually in most cases is wanting. And I believe for my fellow Africans who are here with us, and even from Lilongwe to Abuja, they may really concur with us that the government's perception of the civil society, especially when it comes to international trade negotiations, is very, very wanting. I would have liked to mention quite a few articles in the East African Community Treaty, which actually are meant to bring non-state actors, especially the private, the private sector and the civil society together in working with the community as an entity. But with time, it may not. I may just want to highlight a few. For one, the provision in Article 7 of the treaty, it provides for a people-centered and market-driven cooperation. When it comes to this, the words people-centered and market-driven is really not clear to the civil society, because it is there in the treaty, but those who are supposed to be the people, the citizenry, the link between the governments and the citizenry, which is the civil society, are not part of this people-centered outfit within the community. They've been actually for quite a number of years since the reorganization of the East African community or reviving of the East African community came into place about 10 years, over 10 years ago, I would say. They've always been in the dark, but all the negotiations, right from the preparation of the treaty, the preparations of the protocols like the customs union, the market protocol, are really not involving, have not been involving the civil society, neither the private sector. This is also evident that as we are meant to move further, more stages further the monetary union protocol to the political union protocol, the civil society may not be in the group or in the process anywhere, because the limiting things or the limiting barrier here is the articles which allow their one-to-one consultation with the council, with the summit, or with the secretariat through the secretary general. The process of applying for even an observer status is really meant to take too long, because once the secretary general receives this request from the civil society, it will have to be taken to the ministerial council for a discussion before it is taken to the summit, to the heads of states or partner states to deliberate on it and approve of it before it could be rolled back to the secretariat for further communication to the civil society. So these are actually creating a number of policy gaps which actually are a hindrance to CSO's effective involvement in the regional integration, and I believe not only in East Africa but in other African regional integration processes. Then at that point you realize that the interstate approach, the way the government actually also consider the civil society versus, if I may compare that with the US here, is a bit different. In most of African countries, the civil societies are considered to be noise makers. They are troubleshooters. And this is more so when they actually become critical of the pertinent issues that really affects the society, affects their constituencies. At the interstate approach, where we ought to have been effectively operating on the public-private partnership arrangement, which I believe is somehow common in most of African countries, it is not effective because one of the pillars is not really active or is not really united so that it can actually deliver or perform its expected role. And this is still the civil society. As we know, partnerships are formed to tackle public domain problems that really affects the society. But in a situation where one of the pillars is not really given an enabling environment for effective participation or an opportunity to roll out their objectives, it definitely becomes difficult to realize a common goal, whether it would be at a national level or at a regional level or at a continental level. And of course, this is also applicable within the AGOA arrangement. I'm sorry to inform you this, that when we were really coordinating the 8th AGOA in Nairobi last year, our biggest concern with the civil society in the States when we were having this kind of arrangements were that quite a number of purported, I would use that word for the purpose of international trade, a number of purported beneficiaries, the small-scale farmers, the small-scale producers along the region, Africa, North, South, West, East, are definitely or are still definitely not aware of the real benefits of AGOA. And we initially thought of kind of carrying out a baseline survey of the people's awareness of the good acts. But we realized that this could not be possible because right from the time the act came into place, it was a discussion between the governments and the U.S. government. And the most important pillar, which is the civil society, which ought to have actually disseminated information about the potential gains from the act, were not involved. And of course, in most cases, they are still hanging. They are still not really effectively reached. And this is applicable in COMESA and in the SADC, as well as the East African community. So without this kind of engagement between the three pillars, we really get a lot of problems, and of course that's why we face quite a number of challenges as civil societies. Among them, inadequate policies, I would say so, because they are only adequate for the governments or for the regional outfits, but for the civil societies or the non-state actors, the policies are inadequately captured in the treaties which actually forms this kind of arrangements and effective functioning of the pillars. Also, lack of political goodwill at the national levels. At our respective national levels, we don't have effective collaboration and recognition by the national governments, especially the relevant ministries which the civil society may want to work with. And of course, lack of capacity, that is the financial capacity to enable the civil societies to reach their constituents, the citizenry. And as it is normal, the government may not actually really give support, and of course it is also difficult to assess such kind of resources from the international community and international organizations. So there is a need also in this case to access information and be disseminated effectively to the larger stakeholders of the community. There is also a need for the civil society to lobby the governments to be able to allocate some portion of the budgets to enable civil society reach the stakeholders, because as my colleague here, Greg, mentioned that quite a number of capacity building which have been done are only benefiting the government officials and not the real stakeholders. There are quite a number of recommendations which, of course, I would be very much willing to share with you, but due to time, I may want to thank you for giving me your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayuma. And briefly, also thank you very much, Greg. Greg's presentation was very straightforward. The U.S. civil society organization has been very crucial in all of the AGOA legislation process, and we've been very effective. The 2005 MFA, the multi-fiber agreement, was something that we all knew about, and a lot of efforts were put in place to pre-warn a lot of the eligible countries that they needed at that point in time when the bill was put in place to maximize the benefit before the expiration of that particular benefit of AGOA. Unfortunately, as Greg has mentioned, a lot of companies relocated to Africa to take advantage of the MFA. And since the end of MFA, we've seen several factories close down, and we've seen those companies moved out because there is no need for them to be in those countries in Africa. These are one of the very, if you may, experiences and challenges that we hope, as Senator Cardin has asked us in our plan for the next 10 years, that we as civil society work very closely with our governments and with our private sector to ensure that we have plans in place to maximize and optimize the benefit of AGOA. There is also the issue of oil. And as Greg has mentioned, when the bill was going through the House and through the whole process, very few of us really thought that energy would be the sector that would drive AGOA. Today, energy does. It's a win-win situation, but it's also one that we need more diversity. And that would have to come from the African side. I think we have over 6,800 items between AGOA and the GSP, and it is only through concerted effort on the African side to see how they can work with their private sector to develop the skills, to develop the required distribution network and take advantage of this particular bill. Capacity building is key, and I will share with you very shortly some information that I think, again, will reiterate the fact that capacity building is going to be very critical in the next 10 years if AGOA is still here and if we want to optimize it. Of course, there is always the issue of weak institutions, and I think Greg mentioned the fact that there are cabinet changes, and when you move someone that is responsible for trade, which is the backbone of most economy, and move them around as often as we've seen in different countries in Africa, it definitely leaves a dent, and those gaps, those dents are very expensive in terms of cost to national budget and to national survival. All in all, I think Greg showed the fact that U.S. civil society are struggling, but they are succeeding. We have access to our policy makers, and we are able to talk to them and influence them. Now, on the other side, Ayoma Matunga, our very good friends from Sodinet, has clearly shown that despite existing frameworks, using the EAC example, the existing framework where civil society is clearly stated as a major stakeholder. Unfortunately, the space that is provided for civil society, they are not allowed to occupy it. And this, again, is been one of the points that when we, the Foundation for Democracy in Africa, we're doing training on the grounds in Africa just after the passage of AGOA, we kind of underscore the importance of government accepting civil society as partners, particularly in developing public-private partnerships that would foster the private sector being more knowledgeable and being more effective in driving AGOA so that the national interest can be fully optimized. As of today, according to Ayoma, we're still having those issues. And I would love to hear from Lulungwe and Abuja if those issues are still there. We worked in Nigeria, myself and Greg, where we set up several public-private partnerships, and a follow-up on that will be very helpful. It's very clear that the civil society organizations in Africa can definitely benefit from the experiences and the work that we have seen and achieved here by the U.S. civil society organizations. And we need to foster that transatlantic relationship and build those strong bridges that would allow some of what we have effectively used here, working with our legislators and working with the executive branch so that similar positive effects can be made in Africa. Before I go to Abuja and then to Lulungwe, I'd like to share with this important audience an interaction that happened on June 15, 2010 here in Washington. It's very critical to our discussion, and it was a discussion with here during the town hall meeting on policy, on African policy. And this question was put to Senator, now Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton, by myself. It's very simple. And I'm going to read it so that our colleagues in Lilongwe and Abuja can follow through on it. The question was, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. My name is Fred Oladende, and I represent the AGOA Civil Society Network. Since we met in Nairobi, some of us in civil society have noticed that AGOA, in terms of export from Africa, import to the United States, has declined, particularly if we take oil export out of the total basket of exporting to the United States. We believe that KEDEP, which is a comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, may present yet another opportunity for us to be able to reevaluate AGOA and be able to help African countries that are ready to reform to expand their exports into the United States. Can you, Madam Secretary, share with us what is the Obama administration policy in terms of reforming AGOA and trying to see how we can expand export through KADEP and the new 6.3 million initiative that the United States was embarking on to optimize the opportunity that AGOA presents? Very simple question. I was expecting just 2-3 paragraph answer. But just to show the commitment from Washington, Secretary Clinton spent a long time trying to underscore some of the problems that Matunga has just shared with us. And our answers are on our website. I want to go through most of it. I know I can paraphrase the Secretary of State, so I may have to just share it all with you. And she says, well, thank you for that. As you might remember, in my speech in Nairobi, I outlined a number of steps to reform AGOA. But we recognize, too, that there is a very good opportunity with KEDEP, and we are working to use the KEDEP developed principles in our Feed the Future program so that we take what has been agreed to by African countries themselves as the base for our work in agriculture. I will repeat what I said in Nairobi. There may be, and there definitely are things that the United States could do that will be better for exports from Africa into the United States, other than oil export, which is a huge distorting aspect of our trade relations. But most of the work that needs to be done in Africa. If you look at the trade between African countries, it is abysmally small. African countries don't trade with themselves. They have barriers and tariffs and custom problems that stand in the way of developing their own economies. I laid that out in my speech in Nairobi. I challenged African governments to change their own laws to increase more trade. If Africa traded, if sub-Saharan Africa traded among themselves, the way Asian countries trade among themselves, the GDP growth would be significant in a relative short period of time. But this is a corruption problem. This is a capacity problem. This is driven by rivalries across borders. And so, unfortunately, the market to the United States is difficult because in order to get products from many African countries, you have to go through other countries, and that's not easy. She went on to say, I will never forget one of the speakers in Nairobi saying that he came from Lagos, Nigeria, and it took him longer to get from Lagos to Nairobi than it would have taken him to get from Lagos to London. So the United States will do our part, but African countries have to start doing their part and making the changes that will grow the economies in sub-Saharan region. There is so much wealth, so many resources, so many opportunities. And we said last year in Nairobi, we stand ready to provide technical assistance, we stand ready to help, but we can't help if nobody is asking for help or if nobody is accepting help. And so again, I renewed the offer. We'll work with anybody. We know how to open markets. The United States is an expert at opening markets. We have the most open market in the world, and we want Africa to export more to the United States. But it is difficult, and a lot of the countries haven't gone to really assist their businesses, in knowing how to export. So there is so much that could be done, but it is hard to do if you don't get laws and policies and customs and everything else changed. So I will renew our offer. We stand ready to assist, but I don't want to be making the same speech at the AGOA conference this year. So we civil society organizations have to make those speeches this year. We've made that speech and we're ready to help and need to have somebody on the other end saying, okay, I would love for some African government to come and say, go through our laws. Tell us everything that needs to be changed, that you believe would increase our GDP by 5% in the next 10 years. And we can tell you how to do it. But it means doing things that are going to run afoul of special interests and government bureaucrats and businesses that already have a lock on a market, and they rather have the biggest piece of a small pie than a smaller piece of a big pie. And so if you are going to have that mentality, it is really hard to utilize the incredible tool that AGOA is. But we will be there to help if people come forward. If some of the NGOs can work with us to try to wrench open those markets, and I think this is a challenge that I'm bringing to us here at this forum, the Civil Society Forum. But it is not something that just happens by hoping it's so or because the United States tries to make it so. It is a structural problem within the way countries in the region relate to each other, and that has got to be addressed. I mean, for goodness sakes, this is the 21st century. If we've got to get over what happened 50, 100, 200 years ago, and let's make money for everybody, that's the best way to try to create some new energy and some new growth in Africa. This is a direct answer from Secretary Clinton. We have also participated this year in 3 training courses, one in Nairobi, talking about market access, and trying to get input from African civil society on what are the issues, what are the problems, what do we need to do to advance regional market so that we can now use the economies of scales and use all of those value addition that we would have attained at regional level to easily and seamlessly get into international markets. Some of the complaints and some of the recommendations we've had, similar to what our friend Mr. Mutunga from Sodnet has shared with us. Now, I would like to turn this over to Abuja and to get your comments and interventions on the 2 presentations, and let us also have from you if there are any recommendations you would have in terms of the approach to address the open invitation here to civil society NGOs by the Secretary of State. Abuja, you have the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we take our first question, we have a few people who haven't had the opportunity to introduce themselves yet, so we'd like to take just a minute to do that. And maybe starting here, if you just introduce yourself.
My name is Ivo Ndoime. I'm a member of the Nigerian Association of Women Entrepreneurs.
Say louder.
Sorry?
Louder.
Okay, they are not here. Okay, my name is Ivo Ndoime. I'm a member of the Nigerian Association of Women Entrepreneurs in Nigeria.
And I'm Helen Onwebuze, also a member of Nigerian Association of Women Entrepreneurs, NAWE for short.
I'm Latifa Abdulrahman, the National Coordinator for Atlei Initiative for Women and Adolescents.
My name is Kiro. I am from Shapa.
Thank you. Over here?
Yes. My name is Salim Mohammed Lawal. I'm the Director, Market Development Department, Nigerian Export Innovation Council.
Thank you. And over here?
My name is Ojingo Zeka, I'm a member of the Nigerian Association of Women Entrepreneurs.
My name is Onyegbe, member of NAWE.
I'm Amina Mohammed, a staff of Nigerian Shippers Council.
I'm Funsho Abiri, the President CEO, Nigerian USA Exports and Investment Group.
Thank you. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, we can hear you, Abuja.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll open the floor if anybody from the table or anyone on the sides would like to ask a question or make a comment.
Yes, from the little I can I could hear when I came in, I think one should appreciate the civil society group and what you're doing. For Nigeria, talking from Abuja, frankly speaking, the areas of problem were probably properly captured in those presentations, I think. The issue of corruption, capacity building, the laws and the custom regime that regulates movement of goods and products generally within Africa is a problem. And of course, that talks about the structural problem. The political will had always been there between our leaders and frequent changes in political leadership. Frankly speaking, America has done well by providing the AGOA platform. We need more help, just like the Secretary of State said, and since we are ready to give us additional help in areas of technical assistance and opening up opportunities so we even understand what AGOA stands for generally. And it's very clear that, frankly speaking, in Africa, the countries benefiting under the AGOA regime, it seems to say that it's the government officials that are benefiting more rather than the real stakeholders. So, frankly speaking, we appreciate the direction. And that is the reason some of our groups are coming up, like our own group, trying to refocus the real exporters to benefit under AGOA. Because the idea had always been that the thing is there, but how to get about it is not well done. One should also appreciate the last AGOA forum, the speaker forum, when one expert was brought in from the US. I think that put in proper perspective on how we can blend the issues and opportunities under AGOA regime to actually benefit exporters. We will continue to seek technical assistance and, of course, help using the platform of the Office of the Secretary of State to actually impact very well on governments that are benefiting under AGOA to have the capacity and to have the political will to assist exporters to benefit under AGOA. It is when exporters are able to actually export under AGOA regime to the US, which is an enormous market. The economy in Africa may remain stunted, and we appreciate these opportunities as they go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have one more comment as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Listening to the two presentations, what quickly comes to my mind is that there is need for more coordination between the U.S. civil society groups and civil society groups in Nigeria, because the new emphasis on trying to work with private sector and civil society as against working with the government directly, it's a welcome development, because the man on the street, the entrepreneur there, the woman, a man who is into export business or wants to go into export business needs direct assistance. So I welcome, and I think it's the right thing for emphasis, to be laid on civil society groups, strengthening their capacity, helping them to speak with one voice, helping them to assess the areas of need. I work for the U.S. government agency, the USAID, and I'll be speaking also from the development perspective. The U.S. government right now provides some levels of assistance to the private sector and, of course, the government in the area of policy development. So I think that is the way to go. We need to put more emphasis on strengthening the private sector so that they can be able to speak with one voice, to articulate their areas of need, and to be able to take advantage of assistance programs that are out there, to be able to help them do more exporting. There is a critical need to strengthen the capacity to do cooperative exporting, because right now a lot of the agricultural producers, they are small producers, and even some of the manufacturers, they don't have the scale that is needed to take advantage of AGOA. You see that? So, and that in itself is a major disadvantage. Many of these guys are, they are discouraged because they don't have the volumes, they don't have the cost effectiveness, to be able to put their goods and services on the U.S. market competitively. So there's need to build capacity to do more cooperative exporting. And I think in that area, we are working with groups, in country to support them. The U.S. government has, or USAID Nigeria has several projects that we are doing right now, working with, agricultural producers, working with entrepreneurs, to help them, to produce better for the export market. Maybe later on I'll be able to say a few things as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abuja.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we will go to Lulungwe, Malawi. We would have 2 questions from Lulungwe, and please let us be as brief as possible so that we could also engage our participants here in Washington and still have time for our presenters to intervene. Lulungwe, can you please let us have your questions?
Thank you. We also had a few people step in. I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves. But for the rest, if you are speaking, please introduce yourself before you ask your question, because we did have a little lack of clarity in the pickup before. So for those few who came after the introductions, can you identify yourself?
My name is Jason Bua. I'm a professor of learning development. I'm Charlie Johnson from the Ministry of Industry and Trade.
My name is Vincent Wangale from the Ministry of Agriculture, Department of Resources.
I'm sorry, can you please be louder? We are not hearing you very clearly here in Washington. Can you please speak directly to the mic?
Do we have questions?
Yes.
My name is Bruce Muntali. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Tobacco Control Commission in Malawi, which is a regulatory body which promotes production and marketing of tobacco. My argument basically is a comment on the role of civil society in terms of understanding the AGOA process. To the small-scale tobacco farmer in Malawi, AGOA is still a textbook case, because most of our farmers have not had tangible benefits from the AGOA process. There's been very little investment, American investment, in value addition to our tobacco. And that in itself has also disadvantaged our farmers in terms of the pricing of our crop, because most of it is basically sold as a primary product and exported as a primary product. So, which is a big disadvantage. So my take on this is that the civil society have not been proactive in harnessing the necessary investment, American investment, in value addition enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Do we have any other questions from Lulungwe or comments?
Yes, please. My name is Emmanuel Karuluma. I work with the revenue body. I just want to concur with the first presentation that perhaps companies mostly from the Far East are relocated in Africa, and the other way scenario was that they enjoyed a lot of tax incentives, which meant perhaps they were not paying taxes, which would have enabled maybe governments to take something for the ordinary people. And further still, it was so observed that the wages that were being paid to the employees were next to nothing. So in that kind of scenario, it would be, I think, helpful if deliberate efforts are made to make sure that there is something that can benefit Africa in the next attempt of the AGOA relaunch.
Thank you very much, Lolongwe. I think all of the comments are taken, and we would now open here in Washington and try to take at least 2 questions. This session ends at 11 o'clock, so please let us be as brief as possible and straight to the point. After the session, we can meet one-on-one and be able to share information more. So we'll take 2 questions, and then we'll give the presenters a chance to speak. Can we have
Mike?
The mic.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for organizing this wonderful event. My name is Rosemary Segero. I'm the president of Segero's International Group. We focus on agriculture, coffee, tea, and other products. And I'm also the president of Hope for Tomorrow, an organization that empowers women and young people as entrepreneurs. My comment and question is to Mr. Ayoma. Mr. Ayoma, now that you are in East Africa, you talked about corruption. You are dealing with one country into corruption. What about now that you have 3 countries? How would that be into corruption, East Africa? One Kenya country, Tanzania, Uganda, and other countries. And also, as a Kenyan entrepreneur and as business civil society woman based here in Washington, D.C., how do you think we can work together in East African community? So as a business person, I want to work with East Africa and work as an African woman and an East African woman. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll take the second question. Can we take this young man over here? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kerry Moore, founder of KBN Foundation, located in Maryland and Washington, D.C., but we also teamed up with profit companies globally. My question and statements relates to everything that you basically talked about today. I was part of Nuclear Week, and I was with Dr. Stephen Chu and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and we talked about the same things that's going on right now. 30 other countries there. Problem is, nobody wants to team up, nobody wants to learn from each other. And so it took me 2 years to get where I am right now, to team up, to learn, to elevate, to teach, to train, to create jobs, not for just young people, but also for veterans and U.S. service disabled veterans. So when I see these sentences here, we got to get over what happened 50, 100, 200 years ago. And I hear this lady saying that she wants to work. Well, we're all here that want to work and increase our wealth for everyone. So I'm here to let you know that KBN Foundation is here. We specialize in renewable energy. We specialize in computers, information technology. We specialize in telecommunications, and we specialize in construction. USAID, I do not have any ties or any strongholds with them. But I do have strongholds with Export-Import Bank and International Development Bank. How can we help you? How can we help each other? I do know one thing. In regards to the policies and rules and regulations in the government, we all need to work together in that. So if we're able to help, we're here.
Thank you very much. And now I would have the presenters answer all of the questions. If you need me to repeat them, we don't have time. Please let's be as brief as we can and straight to the point. Greg, would you please go first?
Well, in terms of the alliances, that's why we founded the coalition. And I think we had been working on parallel tracks, and now we're working as one. And I think that has made a big difference. The Sullivan Foundation, for whom I work, has worked on alliances for quite a long time. We had an MOU with the Prince George's County Africa Trade Office, which is still in effect. We had an MOU with the Partnership to Cut Hunger and Poverty in Africa, the Big Africa Partnership. So I think we got the idea about alliances, and we're all now coming into a new day. The African American Unity Caucus, which was founded by the Constituency for Africa, has brought together organizations that have been operating for a long time independently, and now we all work together. So that's a theme now in Washington, and I think we're making it real.
Thank you. Ayoma.
Thank you, Fred. I think most of the comments actually that came from Abuja were just in support of probably some of the issues that were raised in our presentations.
In Lilongwe, well, Bruce, it is good you notice that also from the southern region, and this would be applicable within the SADC, that the AGOA is become or has been known as just a book which has been read somewhere by some people and kept in the cells. So at least that gives us a need for building our synergy to work towards empowering our people and making the AGOA benefits known to them. And with the manual, in terms of tax incentives, really this should be a national government's priority to work on that. But in terms of the involvement of the civil society, the need for your authority, revenue authority, working with the civil society towards empowering people on the need for effective tax collection would be the most important thing. So I wish you also try to lobby internally to your authority to at least start considering allocating some resources towards working with the civil society on empowering the citizenry on the need for effective tax collection. Roslyn, you have here two questions. In terms of corruption, well, this is one of the most undoing for our society, but it is something which, of course, we are aware that there are quite a number of CSOs working on the fight against corruption, and of course, it is, in this case, my appeal, if the American Civil Society Network and also other organizations which might not be members of the network would actually also think of working or identifying and working with like-minded organizations on that within the region and also at the national level. I believe with effective mobilization or social mobilization at the grassroots level to the national level, the fight against corruption will eventually succeed, and very soon. In terms of how do we work or create business opportunities within the regional framework, I wish you could we could discuss this further, but of course the common market framework or protocol within the East African community, which had just been concluded 1st July of this year, is really providing us with an opportunity for effective trade among ourselves as a region. Ken, renewable energy and construction, I'm happy to hear that you are working with an organization which is really interested in working with the civil society. Please, right from the US to the continent of Africa, kindly try to identify civil societies that could help roll your activities or your programs down, because I know we are really in need of this. This is a component which actually has been missing effectively within the AGOA framework. The component of opportunities for value addition, as it was mentioned earlier, the component of really capturing the capacity building in terms of infrastructure is really a hindrance in empowering our people for effective production of goods that could really and easily reach the U.S. market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ayoma, and I hope that after this session, for those of us who are here in Washington, the two presenters will be available, and even for those who are in Lilongwe and Abuja, if there are any other questions, recommendations, please send us emails, and we'll be very delighted to make sure that we get those answers to you. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is the first of 6 panels. We hope that everyone here will participate in the other panels that we have today and tomorrow. And before we come to the conclusion of this panel, I also would like to share with you in Lilongwe, in Abuja, and here in Washington, a remark from the Nairobi Forum by President of the United States, Barack Obama. Since I started my presentation with President Bush, I would like to end this presentation with President Barack Obama. And he said, over the last decade, AGOA has transformed the U.S.-African trade relationship. Opening American doors to your export has been good for America, creating African jobs, bringing millions of dollars of investment to sub-Saharan Africa, and sparking new trade across the continent. And it's been good for America, with American exporters seeking U.S. expertise, investment, and with African exporters seeking U.S. expertise, investment, and joint venture. And today, we are your single largest trade partner. At the same time, it is clear that U.S.-African trade has yet to realize its full potential. And if the current recession teaches us anything, it is that in a global economy, not only the opportunities are shared, so are the risks. So there is so much more we can do together to plant the seeds of our economic recovery and to achieve lasting prosperity. Only Africans can unlock Africa's potential. It will take your entrepreneurship, your innovation, and only Africans can ensure the good governance and strong institutions upon which development depends. Open markets alone are not enough. Development requires the rule of law, transparency, accountability, and an atmosphere that welcomes investment. And I encourage every country to set concrete goals for overcoming the obstacle to economic growth. I would like to give Lilongwe and Abuja a chance for their last comment before we close this session. Abuja, do you have anything for us before we say bye-bye to you?
Does anybody have some audience?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one closing comment.
Please.
Yeah.
Let's be very brief because we're coming to an end now. Please.
Okay, there's a need to attract more investment to develop the real product sector that can be exported to U.S. Our major constraints is supply constraints in terms of product positioning. Of course, market-driven, as AGOA has provided, is quite okay, but the products are not there. So we need investment to build the infrastructure for the production. And we can do that, and we have started doing that. Like our organization, we have gone into public-private partnership to develop cut flowers and some other exotic horticultural products for export. And I think that's the standing positions, and we'll continue to partner with others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abuja.
Just one more brief.
Thank you very much.
I don't think we have time for another one because we would also like to give Lilongwe a chance. So, Abuja, thank you very much. Can we please go to Lilongwe? We do have the next panel coming up at 11 o'clock. Lilongwe, do we have any comment from you or closing remarks?
Thank you, panel.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Noah. Let me just give a small comment. Simpson's already talked about it, the need for capacity building. I want to say that if the United States could increase its support to the capacity building of both officials from the government and the private sector, so that we can provide information to the farmers, small-scale farmers. Most of them are small-scale farmers, so they need technical skills in order to meet the requirement, the sanitary and phytosanitary requirements to export their commodity. I think that would be very pertinent. But also as a country, we have a lot of challenges. Malawi is a landlocked country. As such, those costs, transportation costs, and then also the infrastructure, we're talking of energy, are quite critical. So some countries in Africa are already disadvantaged. I don't know if opportunity can be there for Sifco, even to consider such countries like Malawi, which are naturally disadvantaged in certain areas, to even before they start competing within the country, within Africa itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lungwe. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Matunga. Thank you, all of our participants here in Washington. And I think with your input and your recommendation, the Civil Society Network, in collaboration with our other partners here, will now go back to Secretary Hillary Clinton with all of the input and be able to present to her the solution that civil society has to offer in terms of our request. I want to thank everyone here, thank Wilson Center for sharing their space and supporting this event. And so we come to the conclusion of this first session. Can we please give Greg, Matunga, and all of our speakers in Lilongwe and in Abuja a round of applause? Thank you, Lilongwe. Thank you, Abuja, and bye.
We'll take